There are some really interesting ways to make revenue and earn some tokens on the Cardano ecosystem. And this is a brand new one called Pulse. It's a copy of Pendle, which is pretty well known in the crypto space. It's something that I'm not too um, well aware of at the moment. But luckily, here I have Christian, the founder of this project, to talk through this whole new Pulse thing that's going on. And for those that don't know, Christian is also the creator and founder of Helios, a domain-specific language for writing smart contracts on Cardano as well. So if there's anyone that should be building something like this, it's definitely Christian. But Christian, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's go through what Pulse is. Could you explain the concept and why you are building this project out?
Well, the concept of yield trading, the idea is that you have yield-bearing assets, and the example that is very typical for Cardano is staked ADA itself. I think that's what most people will be familiar with staking ADA and getting staking rewards. And those staking rewards are a form of yield. It's a pretty low yield right now. There are other CNTs which have much better yield, but it's a pretty good example. Even if you haven't interacted with DeFi on Cardano, you will have interacted with staking on Cardano. And you might also be aware that you can stake through your wallet, or you can stake using validators, using smart contracts, right? So if you can control the staking rewards using a smart contract, well, you could design a smart contract which says, look, you staked so many ADA, and you will always own the right to that ADA. But the staking rewards, we will sell that to somebody else. Or rather, we will mint another token which represents the rights to the future staking rewards of your ADA. And then that token, you sell it. So that's the main idea of yield trading, is that you take something which is yield bearing, in this example, staked ADA, and then you split it into two tokens, one which is the right to the underlying asset, and the other which we call the yield token. And the yield token is the one that you can sell. I mean, you can sell either token. Pulse will be very flexible in that, but I think the main example to make people familiar with the concept of yield trading is that you sell the yield token. And that way you get money now for yield later. So you're locking in gains right now, and somebody else who's buying the yield token is speculating that um, that the yield maybe it will go up or it will stay at least expected range, and they're kind of taking the risk on that, and they're also leveraging um, because they buy the yield token at a much lower price than the full value of the underlying assets. So again, if we go back to the staked ADA example, you've got 100 ADA, you stake it, you get 2.5% per year, or whatever the current typical rate is. And that yield token, so let's say you have one principal token, which is the 100 ADA, representing the 100 ADA, and then you have one yield token representing the yield of those 100 ADA. That will be worth roughly 2.5 ADA over the year. Right? That's the expected yield of that yield token. And then you can sell it right now, but probably for less than 2.5 ADA, right? Because there's a risk over time. And the person buying that yield token, maybe the person buys it at 1.5 ADA or 2 ADA. Well, all the yield above 2 is gain. And it's that percentage difference with respect to the purchase price of the yield token is much larger than if that person would have just had 100 ADA and staked it passively, right? It's not as interesting. If it then goes from, let's say, 2.5% and maybe it goes up to 3%, well, that half a percentage point, that doesn't make such a big difference for somebody who has that 100 ADA. But for somebody who bought that yield token, then it becomes a very interesting leverage. So there, I explained it with staked ADA, but of course, there are much more interesting tokens right now available on Cardano with much higher yields and much more volatile yields, and that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, I understand the concept now. So you lock in your ADA, you get the two different tokens, the yield bearing and the
Mhm.
underlying asset token, and then you can potentially trade that now. So you're
Mhm.
locking
Yes.
in your future rewards now so that you can actually trade them on the market. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, the idea of using ADA and its depreciating yields that we're seeing at the moment probably isn't the best example. What is a really good example at the moment in the Cardano ecosystem where we're seeing much higher yields and more, I guess, dynamic yields? Because I guess if there's dynamic yields, you can try and predict if the yield's going to go up or down, and then essentially bet against or for those particular predictions.
Um, I think a much better example is, and that's also the main protocol that we will be integrating with, is supplying liquidity on Strike. Uh, could also be supplying liquidity on MintSwap or other protocols, but the main one that we're looking at right now is supplying liquidity on Strike. And yeah, there the yields can be much larger, but also much more volatile. Um, because it depends on liquidations, right? It depends on whatever is happening on the Strike platform. It depends on what people are betting on, essentially, what future prices will be of. So there, that yield depends on if people bet wrong, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And it goes to the liquidity provider, and there are the yields can be very high. I think one example is up to 80% per year. Maybe there's even
Wow.
higher.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's super volatile. That's absolutely perfect for Pulse. That's the perfect integration.
And for those that don't know, Strike, they're doing phenomenally well at the moment. It's a perpetuals marketplace where you can do puts and calls against the price prediction of ADA and a couple of other tokens, CNTs, now within the ecosystem. So, amazing platform. And yeah, I can totally see how Pulse could integrate into that and make things really interesting for people that are playing around with the marketplaces there. Okay. Now, you guys, where are you at within the development phase? Have you guys launched? I've seen bits and pieces online at the moment. Can you talk through what people can touch at the moment?
Well, what is really new is that we have our testnet online. Um, we have a contract, right? We have a V1 version of the smart contract, and we've built a testnet version around that. Um, right now, that testnet version just has what we call a single market, um, and it's based on a mocked version of supplying ADA liquidity to Strike and getting that LP token. And so it's based on a mocked version of a Strike LP token. Um, yeah, I think the main thing right now with this testnet version is trying to find a user friendly configuration of all the components and of all the actions that people can do. Um, it's not that easy. So if you've already visited the Pendle app, it can be quite overwhelming.
Could you
Um,
take us through the test net, like do a little screen share and explain what users are seeing here, so we get a better understanding of it?
yeah, sure. Yeah, let me share my screen. Um, so this is hosted at testnet.pulsecardano.org/app. And well, I've connected my wallet here. It has some testnet ADA. It also has some test token. So the mocked LP token is a test token. Uh, and yeah, here at the top, the chart and the data points there. These are mock data points, right? I think the main thing to be looking at is this market, and a market has an implied APY. This will usually be lower than the expected APY, the expected annual yield of the underlying yield bearing asset, because of that time risk, right? So people who are buying these yield tokens, well, they're taking a risk over time, right? And then so that's why this APY will generally be lower. And this APY is interestingly enough, it's based on a calculation of, it includes an AMM. So this is actually an AMM, as well as a token splitting market. It includes everything. So just like Pendle includes everything, this is also an AMM. You don't want to go sell these tokens somewhere else. You don't want to go sell these on MinSwap. This AMM is specifically designed for yield bearing assets and splitting yield bearing assets into yield tokens and principal tokens, using special formulas to keep slippage as low as possible. Because obviously
Right. Okay.
liquidity will be an issue. How will you find a good counterparty? Well, the market pool is the counterparty, and there we want as low a slippage as possible, right? So it's a special
Yep.
mathematical formula. So the APY there is the implied APY. It's not the actual underlying APY. This will be lower. And then the prices of the yield token and the principal token, they are calculated with respect to the underlying yield bearing asset token. So with respect to the LP token. This is probably something that we could improve, right? We could maybe add, the dollar value equivalent or the ADA value equivalent below these numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah, but right now that's denominated in what we call SY tokens, which is another concept that we have to explain.
Yep.
SY means,
There's a lot in here, like the
yeah,
YT, PT, like yield token, principal token. They're all new terminologies that if people haven't seen these platforms before, it all needs to be explained to them. And I guess it's really hard to cram in all that wording within the interface.
it is. That will be another challenge, I think, to design an interface that has all the functionality and at the same time explains it. Um, it's a challenge, yeah. Um, right now, the focus has been on getting the testnet functional, the testnet version functional. Yeah, so the next step is to make it as user friendly as possible. So yeah, we need to explain SY. SY means standardizing the yield. In the case of Strike LP token, it's kind of easy. It's a one-to-one relationship. So what you would do is you would enter the platform, you have your LP tokens, and then you convert it into SY tokens. Basically, it's a one-to-one wrapping. So here I can put a number, let's say 1,000 of these LP tokens, and I end up with 1,000 Strike ADA SY tokens. It's a one-to-one relationship, and then I go into, okay, this is not being part of the. This is not part of the screen share. I'm now signing the transaction.
Yep.
And there, it's just, the order has been sent, so that will be processed shortly. And now that I have my SY versions of the yield-bearing asset, I can do the other actions. And the one important action is splitting into principal and yield tokens. That's the concept that was discussed earlier with staked ADA. You can also merge. You can do the opposite thing where you have YT and PT tokens, and you can merge them back into SY tokens. That's straightforward. There is liquidity provision. So I mentioned that this is an AMM. This is an automated market maker, and you can provide liquidity in the form of PT tokens and SY tokens. And then you can trade PT, SYPT and SYYT tokens against the market, against this pool. So if we, for example, want to say, I have some yield tokens and I want to sell them, I think that's the main example here. Um, well, selling YT tokens, yield tokens, signifies getting SY tokens in return, because everything is denominated in this SY token. It's like the reserve asset of the pool.
Yep.
We don't use ADA, we don't use dollar. We use the SY token. That's also an important concept. People might ask, why don't you use ADA? Why don't you use something more common? This makes the design of the protocol much simpler, because you only need SY liquidity and PT liquidity, which this whole thing kind of revolves around anyway. If we would also have ADA here, if you would be trading against ADA, well, it would make the pool design a lot more complex. There's another exchange rate going on there. Another Oracle data feed in a sense. So SY is the basis. That's, I think, if we can get that message across, that's already a big. That would be a big first win. Um, and um, and yeah, let's try it. Let's try and sell some YT tokens.
Okay.
See if,
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And I think I'll do a video tutorial that takes users through this journey as well. And I'll try and explain a little bit more around all these bits and pieces.
mm-hmm. What we can, of course, do, I think that's also part of our plan, is to do zappings, where, well, you have the LP token, it's 1-to-1. We can kind of mask a bit of the complexity of doing the wrapping yourself and just do it directly with some zapping functions. That, I think, that means that we have to make some changes to the contract, or we have to make some additions to the contract. It's not that straightforward. That's further down the road, right? So let's first get these basic transactions, these basic actions that interact with the pool. Let's get these working. Let's get these working in a more or less user-friendly way, as good as we can. And then later we can look at zappings, where the complexity of the wrapping and the unwrapping is hidden a bit behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was interested in knowing how many ADA Cardano transactions are happening here and what the fees are in terms of using the platform. Like we have to convert, SY. We have to then we've got splitting, and then we can trade. So I'm counting multiple different transactions here, and they kind of add up as we step through all of this.
Yes, the transaction cost does add up a bit. We do have a batcher where we can take many orders at the same time for a given pool. So that way we can maybe eliminate some of the costs, but ultimately you can imagine that each transaction is more or less going to cost 1 ADA, roughly around there. Because it's an order, you send an order and we have to process the order, right? And both have their cost, and together you can say order of magnitude 1 ADA roughly. So yeah, if we start counting here, wrapping, first time you come to the platform, you have your LP tokens, you need to wrap them. So they're 1 ADA. And then maybe you buy YT tokens directly. You want to take that risk. You want to take that want to leverage. You want to take the leverage position. Well, then it's just another trade. So you spend 2 ADA to get your yield tokens. And then to actually claim your yield, you also need to claim your yield. That's another part of the platform. So we have this portfolio tab. Let's say you have a position in this market, in this pool. You have to claim your yield. That's another transaction. You can do that as frequently as you want, or you can just do it at the end. And at the end here signifies after 1 year. So pool has a maturity. We've taken 1 year as the example here. And once the pool is matured, the YT tokens themselves become obsolete. There's no more yield to extract, or there's no more yield to claim. But the platform will make sure that all the yield that you have the right to until that point in time, you're able to claim it. So you can just do it at the end. So I think in this example, 3 ADA, let's say 3 ADA more or less. It will
Okay.
be a little bit more expensive, I think. There's some other stuff going on behind the scenes here. You can't claim yield like you can in Ethereum. In Ethereum, you can basically the way Solidity works is that you can program anything into. So let's say you have an ERC20 interface with withdraw and deposit functions. You can program anything into that withdraw and deposit function, including the claiming of the outstanding yield. You can't do that in Cardano. You just have yield tokens in your wallet. How do we know that you've held those yield tokens all that time and are able to claim that yield? How do we know that? So we need to witness that. So you need to stake those yield tokens with us. Again, something that we will take care of automatically, but it's another transaction happening behind the scenes. So let's say another ADA, maybe. So 4 ADA. And we all want ADA to go up steeply in price. So yeah, not super cheap. Not super
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm kind of predicting that if there are, I'm sure you work out a way that you can optimize
Mhm.
the transaction fees on here. But yes, if the price of ADA does go up, then I see users that have large amounts of yield to play with, or LP to play with on Strike would be using this platform because they see the benefits there. Small
Mhm.
holders wouldn't because it's costing them too much in regards to using the platform. So a couple of challenges there to look into.
Mhm.
I guess you could also possibly take this over to like a Hydra or something like that and work out your own fees and uh, make something a little bit more cost effective there, maybe.
Yeah, yes, this could definitely run on Hydra. Um, Hydra is becoming more stable. I think I've even built some small tools to interact with Hydra. So that's gradually becoming reality. Um, we
We'll
have to
see.
look into the precise design of how that would work, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we've got a lot to look forward to here and a lot of new opportunities in the DeFi space now that Pulse is coming along. How far along are we from testnet to a mainnet launch? When could users possibly be touching this with their mainnet wallets?
Um, we are very optimistic.
Yeah.
We think we can.
You don't need to
We
set a date.
No, but before the end of the year for sure.
That is optimistic. All right, cool. Looking forward to it. Now, how can people find out more about the platform? And I'm sure some users watching this interview will be interested in jumping in and playing with the test net and giving you guys feedback, especially those big whales out there that are interested in using a platform like this. How we can contact you? How do we get to the platform?
The best way right now is to join our Discord server, which is open to anyone. Um, and we have a light paper. We published a light paper which kind of explains this process and some of the technicalities. Um, and I think there's a link to the light paper on our website, pulsecardano.org, as well as links to Discord and Twitter account. But yeah, I recommend just Discord, and we have some channels, some read-only channels, which have the same explanations. And there, if anything is not clear, someone will be able to answer pretty quickly. So I will answer, or somebody else in the team. So yeah, Discord,
Okay.
I recommend that.
Discord's the place to be. Okay, I'll make sure that links and references, everything is down below so people can learn a little bit more about Pulse. But Christian, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and building a brand new DApp on the Cardano ecosystem. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.